Hello, my friends. Hello, and welcome once again to Stately Vaughan Manor, where Roger and I have returned for my weekly reading report. It's time for my weekly reading report, that fantastic program where Roger and I talk about all the stuff that I read during the previous week. And I did read some stuff, and I got some stuff in the mail. Some stuff came in the mail. And one of those things was a book that I read, so I'm going to talk about that. But to do that, let me break out my wonderful list for the 500 book challenge, the ongoing 500 book challenge, the challenge where I will read 500 books that I own before I will buy any new ones. I can't even remember what the last book I bought was. Does anybody remember what the last book I bought was? Because I have no idea. Anyway, it's the 500 book challenge. Where are we? Okay, where did we end up? Okay, so 219 was the Spider City of Flaming Shadows. Read that. And then I was on the Human Termites. Okay, the Human Termites. This was book 220 in the 500 book challenge. It's actually a double because it's got a little story in the back, The Ambassador from Mars. So I finished the Human Termites, and it finished up pretty well. This is a good pulp story from the 1920s, and it reads exactly like a good pulp story from the 1920s. It ended all right, although there were some things left hanging. Like, there was the revelation that human beings were actually a hive intelligence just like the termites were, and that there was a giant brain which was lurking in caves beneath the Rocky Mountains, and that it somehow directed all the humans in the United States and could control them. And that whole storyline was abandoned, or at least it was never touched upon again. That seems like it was kind of important, but it wasn't as important as killer termites, and there were a lot of those in this story. So yeah, the Human Termites, it was good. It's not great, but it was good, and it certainly is good if you want something to read for Garb August. I would recommend the Human Termites. Then you follow that up in this book with The Ambassador from Mars. It's the Ambassador from Mars. It's this guy. He's the ambassador. So this is some architect from Earth who was just hanging out one day, and he gets kidnapped by Martians. I hate it when that happens. So he was kidnapped by Martians. He's taken up to Mars, and he runs into an old friend of his who was also kidnapped by Martians. Only he's happy about it because the Martians are awesome, and he met a beautiful Martian princess. You know, the way things are supposed to happen in one of these old pulp stories. So he's happy, but the architect's like, what's going on? Well, it turns out that the planet Mars is dying. It's a dying world. The Martians' population is dwindling to nothing. There's just one city left. And the entire world is being overrun with monsters who live beneath the earth and then come out and eat our heroic, wonderful Martians. So there are Martian monsters, and there are the wonderful Martians who kidnap people. So what the Martians want, since their civilization is dying and they're always under attack, they want this guy to become an ambassador to go to Earth and pave the way for a mass immigration to the planet Earth. All of the Martians are moving to Earth. And they think it'll be great because they have advanced technology and they can give us all kinds of knowledge and stuff, so everything will be wonderful. Meanwhile, they're being slowly eaten to death by these monsters who live beneath the earth, these humanoid, reptile, crawly things. Now, there's one point in the story where, and they're invulnerable. The monsters are invulnerable. Nothing you can do will hurt them. But our hero learns the secret. It takes an incredible string of coincidences for him to learn the secret, but he does. He's underground at the time, and there's an earthquake, and he's cut off from his friends, the wonderful Martians, and he stumbles upon two of the ghastly monsters who are invulnerable, who are hanging out and they're just talking to each other. And what are they talking about? They're talking about the one thing in the entire universe which can destroy them. And our hero just happens to have stumbled along at this exact moment to hear this. And so he learns the secret to destroy them. And he gives it to the wonderful Martians, and they now can defend themselves against the crawly creatures. But they still need to get to Earth because, their world, Mars, is dying. Now, this whole story goes along pretty much exactly as you expect it to until the end. I won't reveal the ending. I will just say it's not the ending I expected. In fact, it's completely different from the ending that I would have expected. So it surprised me there, and I appreciate that. You would expect, or I expected from reading a million pulp stories and, reading Edgar Rice Burroughs all the time, you expect a story like this to go in a certain direction and have a certain resolution. It did not. This went in an entirely different direction that I did not see coming, which is nice when every single thing in the story is predictable up to that point. So, The Ambassador for Mars, I won't say it's a good story, but it did end well. At least it wasn't the ending I was expecting, which was something. So The Ambassador for Mars, The Human Termites, there, I read that. What else did I read? Oh, number 221, I read The Fantastic Four Marvel Masterworks, number 19. So that was book 221. I am reading every single issue of The Fantastic Four from the first run of The Fantastic Four. And at the moment, I'm reading those on my tablet electronically because I do not have them in any other form. And so I'm on Marvel Masterworks volume 20 now, and issue 222, where poor little Franklin Rogers seems to be possessed. So in this Fantastic Four comic book, the 1970s are over. We are past the 1970s. We're in 1980. And the 70s were great. The 60s were great. So we had 20 years so far of really, really good Fantastic Four comics. It's excellent stuff. So now we're into the 80s, and we briefly had John Byrne on the book, and we had Marv Wolfman writing, but now Marv Wolfman is gone. John Byrne did a couple more issues, but now it looks like there's a new creative team. The writer is Doug Mensch, famous for comics like Moon Knight and a bunch of other kind of off-the-wall stuff like, Werewolf by Night and Planet of the Apes and everything. He pretty much wrote everything at one point or another. And the artist is the artist that also worked on Moon Knight with him, whose name I can never pronounce. It is Sankiewicz. It's wrong. I've been told how to pronounce this guy's name before, and I still can't pronounce it. So I will be corrected. But yeah, Bill Sankiewicz. Doug Mensch. And this is the splash page. It's a little odd. I don't know what Franklin's doing there. But okay, that's how this story opens up. Haven't read the story yet. I had to say, the artwork doesn't work as well here as it did on Moon Knight. At least it doesn't seem to. But we'll see. I think there's about a year's worth of Mensch on the book. And then we get John Byrne back, I believe, as both writer and artist. So I'm looking forward to that. So we're in the 1980s with the Fantastic Four. That's awesome. What next? Okay, book 222. It's almost dropped it. It's The Forever War. Don't drop The Forever War, Roger. It's The Forever War by Joe Haldeman. A fantastic book. This book's awesome, man. At the end of every year, just like every other booktuber, I do a 10 best list. This will probably be on the list, unless I read 10 other books which are just amazing, because this was a great book. The Forever War, about a war that, takes forever. This was written by Joe Haldeman, very much inspired by his experiences in Vietnam. This book could probably only really be written when it was written, which was the early 1970s. A lot of things going on back then. We had the Vietnam War, which went on so long it must have seemed like a forever war. And we had social change, great social change at the time. The sexual revolution was still going on. All kinds of stuff was going on. And a lot of the experiences that Haldeman had, he put into this book, which is about Private William Mandela, who is drafted into an army in the future. And it's the forever war because this is a battle against aliens. And most of the battles are taking place far, far out in the galaxy. And due to Einsteinian timey-wiminess, sorry to have to use technical terms, but due to Einsteinian timey-wiminess, time doesn't take as long for Mandela out in space as it does on Earth. So there are decades going by on Earth, while only weeks or months are going by for Mandela. And so he goes and he fights this engagement out in space on this other planet. And after his initial battle, he comes back home. And he realizes the world has completely changed because decades have gone by while, he was just gone a relatively short time. His younger brother, for example, is a middle-aged man now. His mom is 80 and sick. And the entire world seems to have changed. And there's no place for him here now. And the government wants him back in the army. And so they've made sure that even if he wanted to stay, he couldn't. He wouldn't be able to find a job. And so he has no other place to go but back to the army and back to war. And certainly when you're a combat soldier and you do a tour of duty and you come back home, you're gonna have a hard adjustment. But at this time, things were happening so quickly, and social change, things were happening that, it must have seemed like if you were gone a year and you come back, everything's different. On top of having to deal with PTSD and whatever else you have to deal with. And you get a lot of that in this book because the world just keeps changing. Earth keeps changing. And eventually hundreds of years are going by while Mandela is out fighting the war. Now, in 5 years of his time, he goes from being a private to a major. But as far as the Earth is concerned, almost 1,000 years have gone by. And so the soldiers he's fighting with, because he somehow managed to survive this whole war, but the soldiers he's fighting with are, they're practically aliens to him because everything has changed so much back home. And in fact, some odd social changes have happened. Well, the weirdest thing is that on Earth, everybody has turned gay. Everybody's gay on Earth. This is due to conditioning. The government decided that overpopulation was a huge problem, so they're going to control the birth rate by making everybody gay. And now Private Mandela, because he's a straight guy, is considered a sexual deviant. This is an odd choice on Haldeman's part. Certainly, if the government is concerned about overpopulation, there would be other measures you could take that might make more sense, but not in this book. So that's the only thing that I guess doesn't really work, but I understand why Haldeman did it, because he did it because now our hero, Mandela, can't go home. He can't. Even if he felt like he could somehow try to fit in, he can't. Because now he's a sexual deviant. He's straight. Everybody thinks he's called, by the end of this book, his troops call him the old queer. Even though, he's only in his 20s, but since he's been technically alive for hundreds of years, he's old. And he's queer because he's straight. It's interesting. So there are oddities like that in this book. But when you're a science fiction writer and you're writing about social change in the future, you're going to get some odd things like that. I'm sure science fiction writers are writing now about stuff that, in 50 years, people are going to be going, can you believe he wrote that? What the hell? I mean, that's just inevitable, that kind of thing. It's a great book. It's just so engaging. And the last third of this book is amazing. It's amazing. So, a great anti-war novel, a great science fiction, military science fiction novel. It's just an incredible book, The Forever War. I highly recommend it. So there's that. Now, I also got some stuff in the mail. And one of the things I got in the mail was what turned out to be book 223. So if I get a book in the mail, I didn't buy it, I own it, so it'll count. I admit this is a little shady, but this challenge is going on so long, I'm allowing it. So anyway, I got this in the mail, and this is The Shadow Kingdom, which is an adaptation of Robert E. Howard's The Shadow Kingdom, which was a King Kull story, the first King Kull story, and considered by many to be the first real sword and sorcery story. And this was sent me by the artist, Russ Leach, who told me about it in an email, and I was like, it's probably going to suck. Because literally anybody can do a comic book adaptation of The Shadow Kingdom. It's in the public domain. And that's what this is. But I was pleasantly surprised when I got this, because it's pretty cool. I mean, the artwork is really cool. This is just an excellent graphic novel adaptation of The Shadow Kingdom. And so I was pleasantly surprised. There's King Kull. King Kull is the main character in The Shadow Kingdom, of course. You can't put King Kull on the cover here because that's a licensed name. You need to get the license from Heroic Signatures to do that. But you can do an adaptation of this story for sure. And that's what this is. And it was surprisingly good. I was pretty happy with this. Now, Leach followed this up with what's going to be, I guess, a quarterly comic, The Atlantean. So this is an unauthorized Kull comic book, the same way the Cimmerian is an unauthorized Conan comic. And it's got a nice cover for its first issue. And I guess, like I said, this is going to be a quarterly black and white magazine. So sort of in the tradition of Savage Sword of Conan, all in black and white. And so I haven't read this one yet, but I look forward to it. So The Atlantean. And so, like I said, this is going to be a quarterly, which follows The Shadow Kingdom. So that was cool. I got those things in the mail. And I might talk about these a little bit more in the future after I read this one. I also got another Robert E. Howard Conan thing in the mail. I got this. This is The Savage Sword of Conan, Volume 1. So this collects the first 3 issues of Titan Comics' Savage Sword of Conan, their revival of the great Savage Sword of Conan magazine. A friend of mine somehow ended up with 2 of these. I don't know how, but he did. And he's like, hey, I got 2 of these. Do you want one? And I said, yes, I'll take that. So he gave me this. So yeah, The Savage Sword of Conan. I have read all of these. I read all of these electronically, but it's cool to have a physical copy. And I know there were some problems with the initial issue, which was printed on newsprint. I hear it was like kind of smudgy and stuff, kind of blurred. But this prints it all perfectly, as you could see from this map. And yeah, everything here is just printed beautifully. So this is kind of cool. So first 3 issues. And the second issue of this actually has a story by Jim Zub, which is really, really good. Kind of a horror story by Jim Zub, and Richard Pace does the artwork. And kind of a Weird Tales horror story that I think might be Zub's best work so far on the new Conan. So that's definitely worth checking out. So this is awesome. I was happy to get this. It has Conan as a werewolf. That's not something you see every day. So yeah, The Savage Sword of Conan. That was awesome. So I'm going to have to dive back into that and reread those issues because that would be fun. So what else did I get in the mail? I got this book in the mail. My friend Lise sent me this. Now, she usually sends me books that are related in some way to Mary Shelley because she's a huge Mary Shelley fan. And so when I got this in the mail, I was surprised and I didn't recognize what this was. I was like, well, what does this have to, what is this? So it's a ghost story collection, Phantasmagoriana Deluxe. And it turns out that what this is, well, I'll just read the back. First published in 1812, Phantasmagoriana has become one of the most seminal ghost story anthologies of all time. Originally collected as a French translation of 8 German language tales, Phantasmagoriana famously led to the creation of such works as the horror classic novel Frankenstein and the short story The Vampire. So this was the collection of short stories that John Byron and Polidori and Mary Shelley were all hanging out that one summer reading, and which led to them deciding to come up with ghost stories of their own. And that's awesome. I never thought I would have a chance to read that book, but here it is translated into English. So that's kind of amazing. It's not a particularly long book. So I probably will pull this out during Horror Mayhem. Because certainly this is a bunch of stuff that I've never read before and never expected to have the chance to read. So that's awesome. There's that. What am I reading right now? Well, if you watched yesterday's video, you know I'm reading It. I'm 100 pages into It at the moment. 104. The next chapter I have to read is Beverly Rogan Takes a Whoopin'. That doesn't sound like any fun at all. So I will be reading that. So 100 pages so far into It. Still really good so far. Can he maintain it for 1,000 pages more? We will see. Next week, I probably won't have a weekly reading report up because I work on Monday. In fact, I think I only have one day off next week. So I'm not going to have a lot of time for videos, but I'll just be reading this anyway. I will come and see you again as soon as I can. I should definitely be here for Epic Comic Book Wednesday. That's all I have to say this week. I will catch you next time.